the crypto drop in there as you did in regards to the analogy. Because as you were explaining it, I was like, was Haiti the first DAO? Were they the first? You know, those like just they can't.
Oh, interesting. Isaac, what's a DAO? Because not everybody knows.
We gonna get into it, but ultimately it is a decentralized autonomous organization. And so there is a without getting into too much of the specifics, ultimately it is people coming together saying that not one person is going to have more authority than the other, and we're going to come together and identify a common either problem or solution that we want to put into the place. And through this mechanism, this infrastructure, this governance, this allows us to do it to where there isn't we'll just say a imbalance of authority and power, which is the decentralized aspect of it, right? And so it's all right. I was about to get it. Let me stop. All right, so which we'll get into some of these terms, but that's why I wanted to say that, because like, yo, we came together. We may not say the same language, but we want the same result, right? Yep. And so that's incredible. As we get into some of the information that we really just got into, so I'm gonna shift some of the questions I have, but it's still going to connect. Who were some of your specific mentors? Or did you have an influential experience that started to direct you towards technology, leadership, and entrepreneurship? And the reason why I ask, because even as you were explaining your posture when it pertains to your relationship with your culture, I was curious. I was like, I wonder who's role modeled that for you, right? That discovery for factual information, standing on truth, right? And being convicted about the steps that you're taking, regardless of what you're doing, right? Because we just heard, for those that may not be aware of LinkedIn, it is a, what would you say, I don't know. Can I throw that B on there?
LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft in 2016. And so it is I believe, I don't know how many trillions of dollars it's worth as a part of being a Microsoft's ecosystem. But I will tell you this, the business line that I worked on, which was Talent Solutions, this was 2015, 2016, 2017, and so on. That one line of business was $1 billion business. So, you know, that will give you an idea. This was years ago. Now, also, the number of people on the network at that time, I want to say, was like 300 million. I think around that time was around 300 million. Now you're talking about almost 1 billion users on the platform. So again, right, the only reason I'm sharing that is to give context around valuations, because I'm sure if you got founders, they want to understand the math behind how do you get to $1 trillion. So just to give you an idea of what makes a company attractive, that's just one line of business, which is $1 billion in and of itself. And adjusted for inflation, God only knows what that would have been in today's, dollars. But my point is, yes, you're talking about $1 trillion. I don't know how much Microsoft is worth now, but it's over $1 trillion. It's a Fortune 100. It's a Fortune 10, I want to say.
Yeah, well, for Microsoft, 9 going on 10 years ago to purchase it for $26.2 billion, right? Like they know.
It was the largest acquisition in tech history at the time, which I was a part of.
Boom. So this range of experience and the range of exposure into best practices, infrastructure, systems, operations, Lisa, she's in the space. And so as you think through just even your time at LinkedIn and what you're doing now, are there a few folks, or is there a particular person, or was there an intersection of, like, I read this article, I watched this interview, I was like, bro, I'm sliding up. Like, what was it?
Well, I'll tell you, my first really, truly significant influence was that kind of put me on this trajectory was my uncle, Mario Nicholas, Dr. Mario Nicholas. He's a PhD in, I think, neuropsychology or cognitive behavioral science. And I call that out as well because when he was in college, I think I was maybe around 8 or 9, and he started to expose me to concepts of Freud and Carl Jung. And, it was such as you can imagine, 8 or 9-year-old, these concepts of really understanding the human psyche, right? Like
Mm,
having a foundational understanding at that really impressionable age of the power of the mind, it really shifted the way that I thought about how I thought, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't just looking at things from the perspective of just doing them as though it were just a reaction. But
Mm,
I think in retrospect, as I look back, I began to understand the relationship behind how, if you can understand the origin of thought, then you can understand the origin of action. And if
yeah.
you want to make adjustments, it starts with it starts with what you think and how you think
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
you act on those things.
Yeah.
So I think cultivating a level of conscientiousness at such a
Yeah.
young age gave me presence of mind.
Yeah.
And, he was very much too about me being independent. He was very much about not, letting my intellect, my ingenuity, my resourcefulness be my economic driver. It wasn't like
Mm,
that. So you're just gonna like, get a, rich husband or whatever, you know what I mean? Which, I mean, listen, I'm not knocking the hustle, but like if you want sustainability, if you want longevity, you want to understand how to take your genius and to monetize it. So I
yeah.
would say that you know, influence was very instrumental in me kind of having a different perspective. And so from there, I would say, when I was in college, I'm very right brained, which is
Mm,
interesting because I'm in a very left brain world. Left brain being analytical, right brain being creative. So
mhm.
my natural tendency is to be very right brain, very creative, very imaginative, etc. And so I graduated college with the intent of being a fashion stylist. And I'm from New York. So I went to school in shout out to UNCG, the Spartans. I was in Greensboro for college. And so when I went back to New York, I wanted to be a fashion stylist. And so I pursued that career. Now, this is interesting because I think a lot of times people think that people who are in tech, they study comp sci, they study business. I have a degree in communications, which makes sense when you think about styling, fashion styling, because that's a form of nonverbal communication. What you're
Yeah.
wearing says a lot about who you are, how you are, etc.
Yeah.
So I, you know, in pursuing styling, I got to work with some incredible people. Like I really got it off. Like I was able to work with Paris Hilton, Shakira, Alicia Keys, Lil Wayne. And it was a really dope experience. Don't get me wrong, but what I found, and this was my foray into the entrepreneurial world, Isaac, I was not prepared. I was not ready, and I could
Mm,
not sustain. I would get a job here, and then it would be like, feast or famine. Like I get a job here, and
right.
then entrepreneurship, I feel like is very feast and famine. But
Facts.
I couldn't sustain myself living in New York City. Like it's expensive. You
Bruh.
cannot like have a job where you get paid maybe once every 3 months or something like that, and like expect to sustain yourself. So I had to make a hard decision where I was like, my passion is not my profit to the extent required to live this life. And so I had to pivot. And honestly, I decided, okay, what can I do? And I remember thinking to myself, yo, I can always finesse and get me and my girls into the dopest clubs, skip the line, get the promoters to let us in VIP, let the security guards like walk us in the back. Like I just had this like, and it was consistent, Isaac, consistent. I'm like, damn, what do you call that? Just kind of again having the presence of mind to observe myself to see, okay, well, what are the things that are working? And
Yeah.
so it dawned on me that that was sales. And so that's how I started my sales career. And when it came to getting into tech a few years after that, I there was an executive search firm that I found on LinkedIn coincidentally. And I was like at this sort of inflection point in my career because I was like, oh, I was in publishing and, like selling ads and whatnot. And I knew that that industry was contracting. And so I went to
Mm,
the executive search firm and I was like, look, like I'm looking for something different. You know what I mean? Like I want to maximize my potential. I'm looking for jobs that are paying six figures, well into the six figures. I gave them my criteria, and they were like, okay, Lisa, based on your base salary and your compensation with commission, there's 2 job interviews we want to send you on.